There comes a moment in life that almost no one talks about. It doesn't arrive with a loud warning. It doesn't knock on your door or announce itself with chaos. It slips into your life quietly, disguised as another ordinary morning. You wake up. You check your phone. You tell yourself you'll start tomorrow, and somehow the day disappears before you even realize you were living it. The frightening part isn't that you're standing still. The frightening part is that standing still begins to feel normal. And once comfort convinces you that nothing is wrong, your dreams begin to fade without making a sound. Deep inside you, there is a version of yourself that has been waiting for years. Not waiting for permission. Not waiting for luck. Waiting for one simple decision. The decision to move. The decision to act before you feel ready. Every night that version watches you close your eyes with another promise you'll keep tomorrow. Every morning it watches you negotiate with excuses that sound reasonable enough to believe. Slowly, almost invisibly, those excuses become your identity. You stop saying, "I'm preparing." You begin living as someone who never begins, and that is how extraordinary lives quietly become ordinary ones. Jim Rohn often reminded us that life does not improve by accident. It improves by change. Yet most people misunderstand what change really is. They imagine dramatic transformations, overnight success, or one perfect opportunity arriving at exactly the right moment. But life has never worked that way. Transformation has always been hidden inside ordinary moments that most people ignore. It lives inside the alarm you almost snoozed. It hides inside the workout you almost skipped. It waits inside the difficult conversation you almost avoided. Greatness is rarely found in spectacular moments. It is built inside decisions so small that nobody applauds them except your future self. Think about the weight you've been carrying, not the weight others can see. The invisible one. The conversations you replay long after they're over. The ideas you never shared because you feared rejection. The goals you secretly buried because disappointment felt safer than trying again. Every person listening to these words knows that feeling. The strange ache of knowing you were meant for more while continuing to settle for less. It is one of the quietest forms of pain because from the outside, everything looks fine. But inside, something keeps whispering that this isn't the life you imagined. The human mind is brilliant at protecting us from discomfort. It tells beautiful stories designed to keep us safe. Wait until you have more confidence. Wait until life becomes less stressful. Wait until everything is perfectly planned. These stories sound intelligent because fear has learned to speak with the voice of logic. But if you listen carefully, you'll notice something heartbreaking. Those stories never end with action. They always end with waiting. And waiting, when stretched over months and years, quietly becomes regret. Imagine standing beside two doors. Behind one door is uncertainty. You might fail. You might embarrass yourself. You might discover weaknesses you didn't know existed. Behind the other door is certainty. You already know exactly what tomorrow will look like because it will be almost identical to yesterday. Most people believe they're choosing safety when they choose the second door. They don't realize they're choosing a future already written by habits they refuse to challenge. The greatest risk is not failure. It is waking up 10 years from now in the exact place where fear convinced you to stay. There's something remarkable about children that adults slowly lose. Watch a child learning to walk. They fall dozens of times, sometimes hundreds. Yet they never question whether falling means they were never meant to walk. They simply stand again because movement feels more natural than surrender. Somewhere along the journey into adulthood, many of us reversed that instinct. We began treating every mistake as evidence that we should stop. Every rejection became proof that we weren't enough. Every delay convinced us to abandon dreams that once filled us with excitement. But the truth is painfully different. Failure has never been the greatest thief of human potential. Inaction has. Failure teaches. Inaction whispers. Failure leaves scars that eventually become wisdom. Inaction leaves invisible wounds that become lifelong questions. What if I had tried? What if I had started sooner? What if the life I wanted was only waiting on the other side of one uncomfortable decision? These questions echo louder with age because time has a way of revealing what fear tried to hide. You may believe your biggest obstacle is lack of money, lack of opportunity, or lack of support. Those challenges are real. But there is another obstacle that quietly grows stronger every day you delay. It is the habit of hesitation. Hesitation is dangerous because it feels responsible. It convinces intelligent people that overthinking is preparation. It disguises fear as wisdom. Eventually, hesitation becomes a lifestyle. You become someone who researches endlessly, plans endlessly, dreams endlessly, but rarely moves. And movement has always been the language of progress. The world celebrates confidence, yet confidence is one of the most misunderstood qualities on earth. Most people believe confidence comes first, and action follows. The reality is exactly the opposite. Confidence is born after repeated action. Every successful person you admire once stood where you stand now, uncertain, anxious, questioning themselves. They did not eliminate fear before acting. They carried fear with them until experience slowly transformed fear into belief. Confidence has never been a requirement for action. Action has always been the requirement for confidence. There is a reason your dreams still return to you during quiet moments. They appear while driving alone, staring out a window, or lying awake after midnight when the world finally becomes silent. Those dreams are not random fantasies. They're reminders. They are pieces of your identity refusing to disappear. You can ignore them during busy days. You can distract yourself with entertainment, endless scrolling, and constant noise. But eventually silence arrives, and in that silence, your heart remembers what your excuses tried to erase. The tragedy is not that people fail. The tragedy is that many people spend years becoming experts at distracting themselves from their own potential. They convince themselves they're resting when they're actually hiding. They mistake comfort for peace. They confuse movement on a screen with movement in their lives. Every notification feels productive. Every new video feels inspiring. Yet inspiration without action becomes emotional entertainment. It creates the illusion of growth while your real life remains untouched. Jim Rohn believed discipline is the bridge between goals and accomplishment. Those words carry more weight than they first appear to. A bridge exists for one purpose, to help you cross from one place to another. But imagine standing at the entrance of that bridge every day, admiring it, studying it, talking about crossing it, while never taking the first step. That is what countless people do with discipline. They admire successful habits without practicing them. They celebrate motivation while avoiding consistency. The bridge cannot carry someone who refuses to walk. The hardest battles are rarely visible. They happen in quiet rooms where no audience is watching. They happen when you choose to wake up early, even though nobody would know if you slept longer. They happen when you continue learning after a difficult day because your future matters more than your comfort. They happen when you resist the temptation to quit simply because progress feels slow. These moments never become headlines. Yet they are the birthplace of every extraordinary achievement history has ever remembered. You have probably looked at someone successful and wondered what they possess that you don't. Maybe you assumed they were naturally gifted, more intelligent, more fortunate, or somehow chosen by fate. But if you could travel back and meet them before anyone knew their name, you would discover something surprisingly ordinary. You would find a person who kept taking another step after everyone else stopped. They learned to trust small victories before the world ever recognized big ones. Their greatness was never built in public. It was built in private decisions repeated until they became part of who they were. Your future is not asking you to become perfect overnight. It is asking something much simpler and much more difficult. It is asking you to become someone who acts today, not tomorrow, not when motivation returns, not after fear disappears. Today. Because every meaningful life is built from ordinary days treated with extraordinary intention. Every masterpiece begins with an imperfect first line. Every powerful journey begins before certainty arrives, and maybe that is the secret most people spend their entire lives searching for. Action is not the reward you receive after becoming fearless. Action is the fire that slowly burns fear away. Every step you take rewrites the story your mind has been telling you. Every promise you keep to yourself restores a little more self-respect. Every day you choose movement over excuses, you become someone your future self will recognize with gratitude instead of regret. The next truth is one that many people spend decades avoiding because it forces them to confront the one thing they cannot recover once it is gone. And when you finally understand it, you will never look at another ordinary day the same way again. There is one currency in this world that every billionaire, every athlete, every philosopher, and every ordinary person receives in exactly the same amount each day. It cannot be borrowed. It cannot be negotiated. It cannot be stored for tomorrow. The moment it arrives, it immediately begins disappearing. Time has never cared about your excuses, your fears, your plans, or your intentions. It simply moves forward, quietly collecting every opportunity you refuse to use. And the most painful realization is that life is not measured by the years you have lived. It is measured by the days you were fully awake while living them. One day, without warning, you will remember a version of yourself that no longer exists. The younger you who believed anything was possible. The one who imagined building something meaningful, traveling farther than anyone expected, becoming stronger than circumstances ever allowed. That younger version didn't dream because life was easy. It dreamed because it hadn't yet learned to negotiate with fear. Somewhere between growing older and becoming responsible, many people stopped chasing possibilities and started protecting routines. They didn't lose their dreams overnight. They traded them away one comfortable decision at a time. Comfort is one of the most dangerous addictions a human being can develop because it rarely feels destructive in the beginning. It feels peaceful. It feels deserved. It whispers that you've worked hard enough for today, that one more day won't matter, that missing this opportunity isn't really a big deal. The voice is calm. It doesn't sound like an enemy. That's why it is so effective. It slowly teaches you to choose what is easy over what is meaningful until your entire life begins revolving around avoiding discomfort instead of creating purpose. Think about the habits that quietly shape your mornings. Before your feet even touch the floor, where does your attention go? Does it move toward your purpose or does it drift toward distraction? The answer to that question may seem insignificant, yet it silently determines the direction of your day. Your first thoughts become your first actions. Your first actions become your habits. Your habits become your character. And your character eventually becomes the life people assume happened by chance. But nothing meaningful ever happens by chance. It is built one invisible decision at a time. Jim Rohn often said that success is nothing more than a few simple disciplines practiced every day, while failure is simply a few errors in judgment repeated daily. Notice how both success and failure are built the same way. Neither appears suddenly. Neither announces itself dramatically. They both grow quietly beneath the surface, invisible until enough time has passed for everyone to notice the results. That is why today's small decision carries more power than tomorrow's grand promise. Tomorrow is only an idea. Today is the only place where transformation can actually begin. Most people underestimate how quickly a single day becomes a lifetime. Monday becomes Friday before you even notice. 1 month quietly becomes another. Birthdays begin arriving faster than they used to. The seasons change. Friends move away. Parents grow older. Children become adults. And suddenly you're looking back wondering where the years disappeared. They didn't disappear. They were exchanged for ordinary moments that seemed too small to matter. That is why every meaningful life is created by learning to respect ordinary days. Extraordinary lives are simply ordinary days used differently. There's a strange lie that many intelligent people believe. They think they need to discover their purpose before taking action. But purpose rarely appears while you're standing still. It reveals itself through movement. A path becomes visible only after you begin walking it. Imagine someone refusing to start a journey because they cannot see every mile ahead. They would remain exactly where they are forever. Life rewards those who are willing to move to uncertainty long before certainty ever arrives. Have you ever noticed how fear changes its language depending on your age? When you're young, it tells you that you don't know enough. Later, it tells you that you're too old to begin again. At every stage of life, it invents a new reason to delay. It never runs out of arguments because its goal has never been to convince you that you're incapable. Its goal is simply to convince you that today isn't the right day. If fear can steal enough todays, it eventually steals your future without you realizing it. The saddest person in the world has no walls. It exists inside the mind of someone who constantly imagines a better life, but never gives themselves permission to build it. They become experts at visualizing success while remaining beginners at taking action. They consume motivation every morning and surrender to hesitation every afternoon. Slowly, they begin believing that inspiration alone is enough, but inspiration is only a spark. Without action, even the brightest spark disappears into darkness without ever becoming a fire. You were never created merely to survive each week until the weekend arrives. Think about how many people spend 5 days escaping their responsibilities in their imagination, while spending 2 days escaping reality altogether. Then Monday returns, and the cycle begins again. This isn't living. It is existing inside a routine that quietly drains your spirit while convincing you that this is simply how adulthood works. But deep inside, you know something else is possible. That quiet restlessness you feel is not dissatisfaction. It is potential asking to be expressed. The world will always reward visible results, but life first rewards invisible consistency. Before anyone applauds your success, there will be months when nobody notices your effort. Before your family understands your vision, there may be seasons where they question your decisions. Before opportunities begin finding you, there will be long stretches where it feels as though nothing is changing. These moments test something far more valuable than talent. They test whether your commitment depends on external validation or internal conviction. There is incredible freedom in understanding that nobody is coming to rescue you. At first, that sentence feels harsh. It almost sounds unfair. But look deeper. If nobody is coming to rescue you, then nobody has the power to prevent you from rescuing yourself either. The responsibility that once felt heavy suddenly becomes empowering. You stop waiting for permission. You stop blaming circumstances. You stop believing your future depends on someone else's approval. In that moment, you reclaim the one thing fear has been trying to steal from you all along, your ability to choose. Every action you repeat sends a message to your subconscious mind. When you keep promises to yourself, you begin believing that your own word has value. When you repeatedly break those promises, your subconscious quietly loses trust in you. This is why discipline is far more emotional than most people realize. It is not merely about productivity. It is about rebuilding the relationship you have with yourself. Every completed task whispers, you can trust yourself. Every avoided responsibility whispers the opposite. Over time, those whispers become the voice that shapes your identity. Imagine carrying a backpack every day. At first, it feels light. Inside are only a few unfinished goals, a handful of postponed conversations, and several promises you'll keep someday. But every time you avoid taking action, another invisible stone is added. Months pass. Years pass. The backpack becomes heavier, yet you barely notice because you've adapted to the weight. Eventually, you begin believing exhaustion is simply part of life, never realizing that much of the burden comes from dreams you've been carrying instead of pursuing. The remarkable thing about decisive action is that it creates momentum faster than perfection ever could. One small victory changes the way you see yourself. One completed workout makes the second easier. One page written becomes another chapter. One difficult phone call builds courage for the next conversation. Human beings rarely transform because of one giant breakthrough. They transform because one honest decision gives birth to another until an entirely different identity quietly emerges. Jim Rohn believed that your philosophy determines whether you will go for the disciplines or continue the errors. Philosophy is simply the story you believe about life. If you believe life happens to you, you wait. If you believe life responds to you, you act. That single shift changes everything. Suddenly, obstacles become teachers instead of enemies. Delays become preparation instead of punishment. Every challenge becomes another opportunity to prove that your commitment is stronger than your comfort. Perhaps the greatest tragedy isn't that people don't know what to do. Deep down, most already know. They know they should wake up earlier. They know they should exercise, learn, create, save, forgive, and begin. Information has never been the missing piece. Courage has. The distance between the life you have and the life you dream about is rarely measured in knowledge. It is measured in action repeated when nobody is watching, and when every excuse sounds convincing. So ask yourself one question that cannot be answered with words alone. If every excuse disappeared tonight, if fear lost its voice, if failure carried no shame, what would you begin tomorrow morning? Because the answer to that question has been living inside you for years. And in the next part, you'll discover why waiting for motivation may be the greatest deception ever sold to the human mind, and how the smallest daily actions can awaken a version of yourself you've almost forgotten exists.